good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise. It is this day. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
And a warm good morning to you out there. It's a cold morning in the FCT, isn't it? I'm Kayla Magua. Good to have you all here.
That's why the weather is a bit chilly this morning. So there you go. Just 26 degrees centigrade. The humidity is just about 76%. So, of course, it may get a little warmer during the day. But at the same time, that's why we're going to bring you this lovely scenery. But it's, related to making the place a lot more chilly. It's a lovely sight to behold. We're in some history to that, though, which we're going to bring you in a moment.
Yeah, we're going to be bringing you that for you in a moment. But you see, this weather, it's a problematic weather. And if you have washed your clothes, this was just upsetting. A lot of people have washed their clothes thinking, the rain started, it's going to get better. I'm very sorry. Just keep your clothes inside by the window. Try and do what you can to keep it dry. But it's time to bring you that skyline right now. And it is, like Chamberlain said, a very historic one. So look at your screen right now. Lovely scenery that we are seeing there. And this is in Suleja. Yes, indeed. Absolutely lovely place, very nice, serene atmosphere. But be careful if you ever go to this part of Suleja. This is the Suleja Dam, but many people know it as Gurara Dam, located near the town of Suleja in Niger State, situated at the southwestern part of Niger State, very close to the FCT, primarily used for water supply, irrigation, and hydroelectric power generation. How much of that hydroelectric power generation is one that I would like to know about, Chamberlain?
Yeah, I mean, it's... I think they say it has about approximately 880 million cubic meters. So, that's the capacity, actually. So it also supplies water to Abuja. You say Abuja and FCT.
That's a dynamic people don't know. Yeah. There's Abuja and then there's the FCT. Well, when it comes to that hydroelectric power that this dam supplies, it actually has an installed capacity of 30 megawatts, contributing to the local power supply. Also supports a lot of agricultural activities in the nation's capital, helping to enhance food security here and boost local economies. And of course, a very lovely environmental impact that this dam has on the country. The reservoir has created a large water body that supports fishing and other water-based activities. As you can see, there's a lot of water. But like many large dams, it also had environmental impacts, displacement of communities, and changes to the local ecosystem. These are some of the issues that this dam has created. But a very important dam, one that has helped residents of the FCT for many, many years.
Yeah, and as lovely as it looks, it could be better. Because they tell us that they've got concerns about challenges with funding, maintenance,
yes.
To make sure that it comes out a lot better and achieves the purpose for which it was there. So you have this kind of scenes in the country, in different parts of the country, as a matter of fact, but I'm not sure we focus enough on some of these areas because, look, the country, I think politics almost pushes a lot of things to the background.
Almost as though politics gets in the way of governance in Nigeria many times. And the maintenance of this dam, I mean, it's important that we talk about that issue, which is the maintenance of this particular dam and other infrastructure. We've been doing this for a while, haven't we? Bringing parts of the FCT, bringing parts of Nigeria, just so people can see what it is that we have. But maintenance has always been a problem. How do we ensure that these things don't go moribund? How do we ensure that these things don't become a waste or some kind of housing for criminals? We were talking recently about that place in Suleja, where there's some hotel there. We're trying to muster up the courage to go there and film. But, we can't let things like that continue in the FCT. We have to be able to preserve these things, keep them maintained, and let them serve the purpose for which they were created.
Okay, so we'll take a moment. We will return and bring you some of the dailies which we've got for you in a moment. Don't go away. for you this morning. Nigerian Tribune, Borno bombing, death toll now 32. The big deal. In combating terrorism, Southern senators tell FG we shall seek justice for the victims bereaved. Northern senators. Well, this Nigeria also following the same theme. Borno suicide bombings. It's a pathetic scene, says VP Shatima. Death toll hits 32 as Northern senators, Southern senators lament attacks. Black Monday for Kano, Kaduna, as 25 die, 53 injured in road crash. That's what you also see on the front page here today, this morning. Daily Independent, Borno bomb attacks. Fight against terrorism must be total, uncompromising. Ascribed to the ACF. So they also following through with that particular story, making the rounds here this morning. Daily Trust, how 25 people died, 127 got injured in Kano road crashes. Nigerian News Direct, FG terminates road contract over alleged non-performance. So Ministry of Works also with that one there. Well, look at blueprint. INEC proposes 142 recommendations for improved electoral process. Well, back on the beat again. To intensify engagement with NAS on electoral reform, says Anambra Guba holds 2025. Ekiti, Oshun 2026. FCT polls 2. So, timetable for some polls right there, just in case you want to follow up with that one. You just might. Daily Times, INEC has no power to conduct LG election, ascribed to Yakubu. Says, unless necessary constitutional amendments are made, INEC will only continue to organize national state elections. Commission proposes 142 recommendations to improve electoral process. So those are part of the riders for that big lead on the front page here today. The Guardian newspaper, legacy debts among operators stifle telecom sector service delivery. The Guardian still reports this morning. Vanguard newspaper focuses on economic crisis. Slump in port operations put 40,000 jobs at risk. Ascribed to their investigation. And beneath that, SDGs, 63% of Nigerians still wallow in poverty. Ascribed to Tinubu's aid. So you may also want to see that right there here today. Business Day, CBN reforms drive investment inflows to 4-year high. Capital triples to $3.4 billion in 1 year. Anambra, Ogun, Kaduna, others record no investment. So they might want to ask themselves, why is that the case? So that's Business Day.
So those are the papers that we have this morning, and I'm going to start with the Daily Trust newspaper just so we can take a look at some of the headlines today. 25 people, how 25 people died, 127 got injured in Kano road crashes. This is actually a very serious one. 25 victims are still unconscious. Animals were killed, 120 goats were killed, according to the Daily Trust newspaper. And residents are blaming enforcement officers, and more on that from page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper today. It's the rains. Of course, we're going to be hearing a lot of accidents around this time of year, and it's unfortunate, but everyone has to learn to be a little bit more careful. It's raining right now, it's drizzling right now in the nation's capital, and you would see people just driving really recklessly on that rain. I know your car is really nice. Most of you drive Prados in the FCT here. We get it. But please be careful. Don't put other people's lives in danger. Not everyone's car is as nice as yours. Not everyone's brakes are as good as yours. It reminds me really of an ad that the FRSC used to have many years ago. Drive as though your family is in the other car. That was what that ad used to say. Imagine that your family is in the car next to you. That should inform how you drive. Take it very easy. There's nothing that will end. If your life is ended, the world will keep going. If it's that office you were running to, they would have a moment of silence for you. and everybody will keep it moving. So please be a little bit more careful. Don't get yourself into any trouble. And this unfortunate situation here from Kano State, they're talking about how it happened. More on that from page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. And of course, a lot of roads in the news. We're also seeing a lot of the Federal Ministry of Works has its public service announcements. And we're seeing it in multiple papers. The Daily Trust has it. We're seeing it on the Leadership newspaper as well. So let's take it from the Leadership this morning. This public service announcement is an invitation to stakeholders for an engagement on the Renewed Hope Legacy Road Infrastructure projects. So we're looking at particular roads, in Sokoto, the Badagry Superhighway, and then I think that's a 1,000-kilometer highway connecting Sokoto to Badagry. So that's being discussed there. The spur of Lagos, the Calabar Coastal Highway crossing Enugu, Abakaliki, Ogoja, Trans-Africa Highway from Cross River, Ebonyi, Benue, Kogi, Nasarawa, and Abuja. So that is being discussed as well. And then, of course, this Sokoto Badagry Superhighway. So there's a lot of engagements going on right now. Maybe get yourself a copy of the Leadership newspaper today. Find out which one concerns you, which one you're interested in, and then you can find out what the engagements are on those levels, Chamberlain.
You know, one thing that gives me huge concern, and I think a lot of people may resonate, this may resonate amongst a lot of people. Look at the front page of Vanguard newspaper this morning. Just beneath that lead story, which they talk about the economy. 63% of Nigerians still wallow in poverty. That's Dr. Tinubu's aide. She was talking about our quest to meet up with the SDGs, and that's about 133 million. And you know that 130, we're not talking about 10, 15, 20, 133 million. Look, that's more than a country, more than countries in this world, this same world that we are in. Yes, she went ahead to give some of those breakdown, and how she did say that multidimensionally poor, by the way, so you understand all of that. 65% of poor people live in the north, while 35% live in the south. And this is something that, that report came up a long time ago. I know they bandy all kinds of figure, all kinds of data about whatever it is that they're doing in those states, but I don't know, I think that would be a drop in the ocean for a lot of things to happen. So this is, I don't know what other word to use to describe it that people have not used already in terms of the kind of challenges we're facing. Because as the year goes by, we're still rapidly increasing our population without thinking about all of those that are the population that is expanding. What facilities, what measures, what are we doing to engage and ensure that we address this concern? Because if you have, even if it's 100 million about idle hands, look, it's just a matter of time. Not to alarm anybody or sound alarmist, but if that's what's going to wake us all up, why not? Because the states...
You're not being an alarmist. You're not being an alarmist. You're telling the truth.
I don't know what it means for 63
people
in the states.
63% of people to be in poverty. How do you want to have security in such a place? How do you want to have good governance in such a place? Because everybody will be looking for what to eat.
Yeah.
Which means that votes will be bought. Rice and oil and Maggi and a few other things.
And that's why they say politicians weaponize poverty.
Yes. That means that you can weaponize this and get your way. That is a bigger problem. And then the insecurity. We keep talking about, we're talking about Gwoza right now. Everyone is talking about it. What feeds terrorism is poverty. That is where the house is. That is where they recruit from. That is what creates the situations that we have. And while we're busy talking about kinetic measures, or the military has to do this, we need more security, there is the non-kinetic issue. And I've heard the Chief of Defense Staff, I've heard him talk about this before, where he said, look, while we are doing what we have to do, the non-kinetic measures have to be put in place, or we are just, you're winking in the dark.
And
you're winking in the dark.
As if that's not enough. The paper there talks about the slump in port operations, putting 40,000 jobs at risk. And as though we don't have a lot of challenge already with the amount of poverty And then 40,000 jobs in addition to what we face.
So you're
already.
adding more people to the poverty net.
And that's not all. Even where you try and get more funds or more resources into some agencies, mismanagement and embezzling of those funds happen. So it just looks as though some people don't, it seems as if whatever else is happening, they're in the moon. Knowing that, look, yeah, you can get, even if you get all those funds, how do you ensure it's properly utilized? Because some states, as it currently stands, if they apply those resources properly, you'll get a lot of development in those states. And you get a lot of people occupied. But, you know what they say about your guests being as good as mine. We'll focus on some of those things in just a moment, so don't go away. Welcome back. Yes, indeed. We're going to be talking tax matters this morning. Mr. Taiwo Idele is here with us in the studio. He is the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Where are we now with all of the proposals you've been talking about ever since?
Thank you very much. So we have made significant progress.
Okay.
You know, it's like building a house. You spend a lot of time getting the foundation right. And I do understand and appreciate the lack of patience. Even for us in my committee, we wish we had implemented everything like yesterday. But we are now moving to phase 3 of our work. Our work is divided into 3 phases. The first phase was quick wins, second was critical reforms. We just completed that. And now we're moving to implementation. So as we speak, we have about 5 draft executive orders. We have a withholding tax regulation that has just been signed by the Honorable Minister. So it's currently with the Ministry of Justice for the formatting, gazetting, and then it will be published officially. And that's going to provide a lot of relief to businesses, particularly small businesses, but even for all businesses in terms of the pressure on their working capital. You know, we need to free up capital for businesses, especially now that the rate of interest is over the roof. So that has been implemented now as we speak. We also have draft laws. We've drafted all our major tax laws. We've drafted brand new ones because we took the view that we shouldn't be amending laws that some of them we inherited from our colonial masters. There's no need trying to amend those. So we've drafted new ones. We have sent about 10 amendment bills to the National Assembly for constitutional amendments because some of the issues we identified during the extensive work we have done, actually the problems emanated from the Constitution itself, like overlapping powers on taxing rights. At the end of the day, you know, you have VAT, for example. You also have consumption at the state level. Who suffers? The Nigerian people. So we thought it's important to provide clarity and clear demarcation. So we have done a lot of work. So we are pleased with the progress we have made so far.
So those ones that require amendments, they sound like a lot of them. So it's going to be like a holistic amendment of all of those laws, and how soon are you expecting all of that to happen?
Yeah, so it will be holistic because even though we're also trying to sequence our interventions, because there are certain things that must come before the others, but they're all connected. So the stage where we are now, in fact, we spent about 10 weeks until last week doing a retreat where we just locked in everybody and said, you know what, we don't want to be sending letters back and forth between Ministry of Justice, Finance, my committee. So those things can easily take months. We're able to complete that process. So the final thing we're doing now is the cross-referencing. You know, these things are very important in lawmaking. Once we are done with that, we get the formal approval of Mr. President and maybe also FEC, and then it goes to the National Assembly. So our estimation is that this Q3 that we've just started yesterday, before the end of this quarter, we should have the laws enacted. So that way we give at least 90 days notice, because sometimes, you know, when you change rules and policies, people need to, even when they're positive, people need to prepare for them.
Yeah.
You need capacity training for regulators. So we think that will give us some time to do some of that. And then the latest for any of our reforms to kick in would then be January 2025. Although many of them will kick in also in 2024, like the withholding tax regulation is expected to take effect from this July.
Okay, because I was going to come there.
Yes.
We'll equally come to the tax officials themselves in a moment, but before the one that you said will kick in July, is there anyone from phase 1 up until now that has kicked in already?
Yes, certainly. So we had the exemption of VAT on fuel products, particularly diesel.
Oh.
So yes,
okay.
that was approved. And
is that working?
It's working, yeah, since October last year. In fact, it's been extended because initially we had done 6 months, but because we are still dealing with inflation, cost of living, we've requested for an extension, and that has been granted. So that's fully implemented. We also have some measures we proposed to the FRS around how people pay their taxes, waiver of penalty and interest, allowing people to pay their taxes in local currency, that's Naira, instead of trying to buy dollars to pay government, which doesn't make sense. So those have been fully implemented. So it's not 100%, but a good number of our recommendations have been implemented. The rest have been implemented at different stages as we speak.
Do you get asked a lot? Everybody wants to know, is that affecting the diesel price?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Because the diesel price would have been higher if not for that.
Oh.
Sometimes it's very easy to quickly adjust to even benefits, and then you want more, which is okay, and that's valid. But we can tell you authoritatively that because of that waiver, diesel price is less than it would have been without it. And in fact, if you compare the price within our neighboring countries, so in almost every country in the world, the pump price of fuel products has between 20 to 80% of the price in taxes. In Nigeria, that's 0. So the major reason for the differential between the pump price in Nigeria and our neighboring country is really the taxes that are not there in Nigeria for good reasons.
Does this apply to petrol?
Yes, same thing for petrol. There are no taxes on petrol. In Ghana, for example, they have like 4 or 5 different taxes on petrol.
If it wasn't 0, what would be the cost of petrol in your view?
Yeah, no, it depends on how aggressive you are with your tax regime. So that's why I said between 20 to 80%. So countries where the tax rates are really low add about 20% to the pump price. Those that are really very aggressive add up to 80%. So if Nigeria is somewhere in the middle and you add like 40, 50%, just imagine diesel price being at about 2,000. That's really what we're talking about.
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, the perception when it comes to taxation in Nigeria is one that, many people probably want to understand how this is working. I know in places like Lagos, it's very evident. Everyone,
they're very aggressive.
Yeah, they're very aggressive with it. But in places like Abuja and other parts of the country, it doesn't seem like many people are very aware of how our taxation works, just so people can understand what it is that's going on. Everyone is really focused right now on the high cost of living and how everything is difficult, but there's also the taxation that's supposed to help with the building of infrastructure and things. So just so people can understand the taxation that they're going through right now and what it does towards towards the improving of national infrastructure. Remember that a lot of people are watching the news right now and watching Kenya and seeing what the tax situation has cost there. So they're wondering, what's happening here? So just so people can understand that for a little bit.
Yeah, very good question. So tax matters. I think sometimes politicians underestimate the impact of taxes on the people. If you increase interest rate because of MPR, or you increase cash reserve ratio, or there's so many things you can do and get away with them. But once you go to tax, people can feel the impact directly. So to that extent, it's very sensitive. So where we are as a country today is not where we should be in terms of our tax regime. There are just too many taxes. There are over 60 official taxes and levies. And sadly, despite that enormous number of taxes, we did not even collect half of what South Africa collected from just one tax last year. So the evidence we have from around the world shows that we're doing the opposite of what every successful country is doing, which is that you need to keep your number of taxes to a few, broad base, easy to collect, not imposing burden on the lowest people in your community or society, and then that's how to raise revenue. South Africa collected about 50 trillion naira equivalent from personal income tax alone last year. And 90% of that amount came from the top 5% of society in South Africa. And in South Africa, the exemption they have, if you earn income tax of around 400,000, 500,000 a month, you're completely exempted from personal income tax. So just imagine what that means. You've protected your most vulnerable population. You focus your attention on the elites or people who are at the top of society, and you make this massive amount of revenue generation. What we're doing in Nigeria is we're going after the poorest people. And then we're surprised that we're not raising revenue, which is why I've said time and time again that no country in the world can become wealthy by taxing poverty. It's a contradiction. So some of the analysis we've done now is we've already recommended thresholds for exempting people from personal income tax.
You said 2 million?
I know it's not 2 million naira.
What was it?
We don't want to say that amount here because we're still discussing with the governors, and so we don't want to put out something that may not be approved eventually. But we've done our analysis as to where the poverty line is. So our idea of it is at a minimum, you must exempt people who live below the poverty line.
I mean, that is a very crazy dynamic in Nigeria, and I think many people don't understand that. If we're taxing the poor in Nigeria and protecting the wealthy, so to speak, let's start with these 60 taxes and levies. Are they legal?
Yeah, they're legal. They're
all legal.
They're all legal.
So what we've basically been doing is, because your revenue cannot grow, you're not going to be able to make the money that you need from taxes to do what you need to do with it. Now, this has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah.
And maybe because the taxes are spread, many people may not be able to understand how much is being collected from them. You've been talking right now about some of the things that your committee is working on, trying not to tax people who are below the poverty line. What is Nigeria's poverty line?
That's also a very good question. So we have the international benchmark, which is about $2.15 a day per person. The average family size in Nigeria is 5, 6 in the north, a bit less in the south, but average about 5. Our analysis shows that if you're lucky, in a family of 5, 2 are employed. So the maths or the calculation is how much must 2 people earn to take care of 5 at about $2 a day. We made some adjustment to that because that comes to a lot of money. We know that you can live okay in Nigeria with less than $2 a day per person. Because some of our people in rural area, for example, don't pay rent. They take care of themselves in terms of even the food and a number of things. So we then prioritize those things that put our people in multidimensional poverty based on the reports released by MBS about 2 years ago around health, education, living standard, and then employment and security. For example, we're dealing with cholera. It's the disease of poverty. So why don't we address that? And that's why the mandate of my committee is not just tax. In fact, tax is a small component of what we have to do. It's the entire fiscal reform, including spending, the priority of spending, the quality of spending, and the impact those things are making on our people. We say, if anyone in Nigeria is in a position of authority and they're not prioritizing those 4 items, then they're wasting everybody's time and wasting our resources. So that message we have communicated very clearly to our leaders at every opportunity we've had. And we've designed a new national fiscal policy for Nigeria and that speaks to how our taxes should be designed. Of course, protecting the poor, ensuring that the richer people pay better, using technology to collect intelligence. So we don't ask you how much you've earned; we'll tell you how much you have earned. And then we have the spending policy. So you must do needs assessment and prioritize. Build road from farm to market. Build schools, and don't just build them and take photos. Provide teachers,
spending that
exactly, that have meaningful impact that we can measure. And then we have a borrowing policy as well that we've developed. Our tagline is fair taxation, responsible borrowing, and sustainable spending. And we have all of that articulated. We also have policies around SDG, because we said to ourselves, this whole fixation around GDP actually means nothing to the ordinary person. You say GDP has grown, it has increased. It doesn't mean anything. But if you focus on SDGs, no hunger, no poverty, clean water, decent employment, that makes more sense. And then we can begin to measure those things from year to year. So these are some of the things we've done so far.
So, for businesses, what is it that you've done? For instance, different states, different people writing, saying, look, at the point where they're about setting up, whether it's a mom and pop shop or anything, they're almost harassed out of business by states. So yes, you're having conversation with states. Has there been anything, what have you done to address that is going on in those states?
Yeah, so that's a work in progress. In fact, this is one of the priorities we have. Okay. That we have to deal with this, because I have personally been involved in trying to solve this problem along with manufacturers for more than 10 years.
Wow.
So I have come to a conclusion that it's not a problem you can solve by just amending the law. It requires some practical solution. And I've said this even to our governors and other leaders, that if you want to know how bad it is, just do a banner. So you have no plan to do any business, but just pretend like you want to. Do a banner and say something enterprises, put it out and sit.
And put a phone number.
Yes. Or just even sit and watch. I guarantee you, within hours, all manners of agencies, local governments, official, unofficial, state actors, they will show up like as if it's a crime. What we're hoping to accomplish is we move from that stage where we are today to a stage where you put up that banner and you receive phone calls about what can we do to help you. So that's why we say we're no longer taxing seed, we'll wait for the fruit. So we have to invest with the Nigerian people, let them grow. And it just makes common sense, to be honest, because the bigger the pie, even if you reduce the percentage you collect in taxes, the more money you have. Today, our entire budget, the federal government is around 29 trillion. All the 36 states is about 16 trillion. Put together, you're talking about 45. That 45 trillion naira is barely $30 billion. It's less than the budget of Kenya. It's less than 1/4 of the budget of South Africa. It's less than the budget of New York City, not even New York State. So if you dedicate all of that, and let's say corruption is zero, it can't even take care of transport infrastructure alone. So we have a long way to go. And the only way to get there is to make sure that the Nigerian people, whether they are individuals or enterprises, prosper. Then out of their prosperity, they can then pay taxes.
Another aspect is, because when you speak about those businesses, you want to tax the fruit. Another leg is the banks. So because in some other climes, once you even register anything whatsoever, banks call you. What facility can we give you? How can we help you grow? So the bank charges in this part of the world is something else. What are you doing in that regard as well?
Yeah, so interestingly, we have bankers on our committee. So these are some of the issues we also discuss. Some of them are to do with, first and foremost, banks are businesses. They also want to survive. If the risk of the businesses they need to finance, if the risks are too high because of policy environments, over-regulation, and all manners of things, the profile of the risk is high. So you will not be able to get the kind of credit you need to get. And when it comes to charges, some of them, if not all of them, are regulated by the central bank. So central bank will tell them what you can and cannot do. And we know that the stage where we are at in Nigeria is not where we need to be when it comes to our banking. It's not, anywhere close to what banking should look like, where you're creating credit, trying to facilitate economic activities. So it's pretty much, most of it is lending to government. Most of it is trying to extract as much as possible in charges for almost everything. So those issues are still with us. They have been identified. There are things we have to address in conjunction with all the stakeholders, including the banks themselves and the central bank. And that process is ongoing.
I mean, I want to be able to talk about, the waivers that the president is working on right now. But before in the health sector, before we get to that dynamic between, because government has to generate revenue, and the nation has to generate revenue somehow. So that dynamic between cutting down the cost of governance and taxation is one that it's a conversation around the world right now. When it comes to Nigeria's situation, we keep looking at the cost of governance and everyone believes this is excessive. Meanwhile, like you just pointed out, the poor are the ones being taxed in this country. So does your committee look at this at all?
Yeah, very well. So we looked at the cost of governance. I don't think there's any country where the citizens are happy with the cost of governance. So that's a general thing. But it's even more important when you're a poor country. And the data we have, many Nigerians don't like this. The data shows to us that Nigeria is a poor country, although with the potential to be a wealthy country. So we looked at the cost of governance, and we thought the best way to address it is to go right into the Constitution and put something there that is sustainable. Because otherwise, what will happen is you come up with your brilliant ideas. If you're lucky, they're implemented. Somebody comes in another couple of years and they reverse everything, and it will be a wasted effort. So what we have done is we recommended a restructuring of our whole budgeting system. So today we have capital expenditure, recurrent expenditure, and then we have debt service and sinking fund. Those are the three broad categories of items in our budget. That's not very helpful, because when you take capital expenditure and you double click, the kind of things you find, you're buying cars, you're building new offices for government agencies. While we're not saying you shouldn't do any of that, we're saying that's not the productive spending we are trying to focus on. So we have proposed 5 categories. Number 1 is infrastructure. Let's have a category for infrastructure, electricity, road, ports. Then let's have the second one for human capital development, focusing on health, education, including vocation. Again, based on multidimensional poverty index. Number 3 is personnel costs, headcount, and productivity per capita. We want to be able to measure the productivity of our people. And in fact, maybe we can then say that minimum wage should not be less than a percentage of the productivity. So that way, the workers are also trying to push productivity up so that their minimum wage can also go up. Number 4 category, we will have administrative overhead. This is the cost of governance. And the last one is debt service and sinking fund. The more interesting aspect of our proposal is there has to be a floor for infrastructure as a percentage of aggregate spending. There has to be a floor for human capital development as a percentage of aggregate spending, whereas all the other 3, personnel costs, admin overhead, and debt service, will have a cap. We must not exceed that. Imagine that we agree that cost of governance should not exceed 5%. We can't go to sleep, because it means that whoever exceeded that is ready to leave office, right? So we think when we can do these structural changes, it will allow us, whether private sector, elite, analysts, to focus on things that really matter, because there's a lot of back and forth always on things that really don't add value to anyone.
At some point, you spoke about centralizing the collection agency. And so I know that there was some argument between states and federal government in terms of harmonization, who should collect what. What's going on in that area?
Yeah, thanks for asking that as well. We had a very good meeting with the governors last week, and this was one of the things we discussed. So the evidence we have is that a tax like VAT is best collected centrally. We looked at many countries around the world where they have federation like ours. In fact, when you look at the EU, where it's even countries, this is not even states, they took the view that VAT for them should be administered at a regional level, just to tell you the extent of where they've gone in terms of trying to integrate. Some of the problems are that because you have interstate transactions, you have international transactions. It's going to be chaotic if you ask state to start collecting the VAT. We recognize that it is a tax of states, but it should be centrally collected. So here are things we have proposed. Number one, every state needs to discontinue with their consumption taxes. They are duplicating VAT. In compensation for that, their share of VAT revenue will go up from 85 to 90%. For that 5% we're adding to their share is more than double what they are collecting from consumption taxes. So it's a win-win for them. Then we said, let's pay more attention to derivation. So in sharing that 90% among states, we have the ability to collect the data about where the economic activities are being generated. So why don't you use that to share the revenue so everybody feels fairly treated? And also we've identified basic consumptions: food, health, education, accommodation, shared transportation, that should carry no burden of VAT, because that's where the majority of our population, over 130 million, spend almost their entire income just trying to survive. Therefore, it doesn't make sense trying to extract taxes from them. They have no ability to pay. So those are some of the things we've put through. And then for the businesses, we want to make it easier for them to do business. We're proposing full credit on services as well as assets. So if you build a factory, all the VAT you spend in putting the factory together, you get the money back 100% from the government. So that way you can grow your business. But that would also mean that we will have to adjust the VAT rates on anything else that is not essential, because otherwise you may just be in very, very deep red.
How do you mean adjust? What will that practically mean?
So what we mean practically is that on items that are not essential consumption, it's not food, it's not health, it's not education, it's not accommodation, it's not shared transportation, the VAT rate will go up. Because with all these things, we are trying to protect the poor people. Our estimation is that the VAT revenue will go down by more than 50%. So we're not going to get the approval. So the reality is that nobody will approve that. So we think if we make some adjustments, if you're buying a mobile phone, for example, you pay a little bit more. So we think that's the way it should be, and that's the way it is in most countries, including even African countries, where they collect a lot more in VAT than we do currently.
Before you go to the health, still, since you were talking about state governors and how this will work with them, we still got calls as last week in different states. When persons are going about their businesses, they still have these street urchins who still harass them, collecting all sorts of tax, either from transport, even if you're trying to dig in a little hole or whatever it is, that is still going on.
Yeah, sadly, even in Abuja, even in Lagos, even in cities. So it has even happened to me here in Abuja. I was actually scared. Somebody was knocking the window.
Exactly.
And they said, well, they look at the car and they feel it's an official vehicle and you should pay certain taxes. That should be behind us today. In fact, it's embarrassing that we're discussing this in 2024. Those were the things we did in the colonial eras. The world has moved on. So what my committee has proposed now is remove all these taxes, we call them nuisance taxes, and replace with just one tax. So imagine you have what we call a harmonized levy. So the amount you pay will depend on who you are. If you are a taxi driver, it might be 5,000 a year. If you're a vulcanizer, maybe it's 2,000. We do those data to determine how much it is. Now, on your phone, you get the assessments by way of text. And then you can pay at any point, maybe for the next 3 months. As you're paying, you can use USSD to pay. As you pay, to tell you the balance that you are owing. If anybody stops you, all you need to do is show them.
That's digitalizing the tax.
Absolutely. So you will no longer need individuals to stand on the road.
That would be so fantastic.
To try and enforce.
Nuisance, they do it. Do say
politicians.
These boys on the street.
Yeah.
They throw spikes into the road.
Yeah, to stop you.
To stop you.
Yeah. Cronies of politicians who give them jobs because they did a job for them.
Yeah.
And then that is how they survive.
And that's even the sad part. So the data we have is for the entire country. Local government did not collect 50 billion
so just to be clear,
from all these taxes.
So that's illegal. Just so we're clear,
of course
it's wrong for them.
More than that.
Is it wrong for them to be on the road?
As of today, it's not wrong.
See, but that's the thing, Chamberlain.
Because local governments...
it's not wrong, so they can continue doing this.
There's nothing that says they should be on the road. There's also nothing that says they shouldn't be. So local government feel like the only way they can collect their money is to go and stop you, because people will not on their own go to local government to pay, and that's the reality. People will not pay on their own if you don't enforce collection. We're just saying that first, there are over 20 taxes local government have to collect today. Why is it not just one? So let's make it one. And then let's stop going on the streets to try and collect. Let's digitize it. And we think that if you want to enforce it, if I say you need to pay $2,000 a year and you refuse, we have the powers in the law to substitute your line, your mobile phone line, for that amount that is due. So any credit you load, up to $2,000 goes to government first. So I'm actually saying we can enforce this 100% without going on the road. And the good part of it is every penny or naira or kobo you collect, you can account for it.
So you talked a bit about some of the essentials.
Yes.
And one of them, you mentioned health. And I'm aware that there's this, the executive order that was signed by the president suspending import duties and value-added tax on essential medical supplies that are imported into the country. Let's talk a bit about that and what impact that's supposed to have on the health sector.
Yes. So, we all recognize inflation is getting out of hand, and we need to address that. And added to that is, while we're trying to address inflation, we must prioritize basic needs, and that's where health comes in. So it's not only health we are working on, we also have the one for food, we have for education and transportation as well. But on health, what has happened now is, Mr. President has approved an executive order that allows for importation of equipment, inputs, ingredients for the pharmaceutical sector in Nigeria, not only to bring down the price of what they import, but also to try and shape the market so that we can start producing locally things like mosquito nets, like needles, syringes. We import all of those things. Can you imagine? Not only do we want to start producing locally, we want to get to a point where we're exporting to our neighboring countries, at least for starters. We have everything we need to be able to do that. The policy environment is only the problem we have. So that's what we're trying to address now. So what Mr. President has approved for that sector has an initial phase of 2 years for these policies to go through, including VAT waiver, tariff waivers, import duties, and the response has been quite positive. So we are currently working through the implementation. It was meant to be, the implementation has about 30 days design period. From when it was signed, I think it was Thursday last week or thereabouts. So we're going through that process now, working with the Ministry of Health, Trade and Industry, and Ministry of Finance as well.
In terms of mindsets, just looking at time now. If I'm a tax person, an official, I go to collect taxes, is it wrong for me to think, well, I'm a revenue generating agency, or I just want to deliver service, or is it the same thing? Will it change my approach as to how I go about carrying out my duty?
Yes, it would. It would substantially. So we're having those. We had even on Sunday. We're working very hard. We had a long retreat with the Joint Task Board on Sunday, just a few days ago, and these were some of the things we were discussing. Even their approach, their mindset has to be very different. The mindset currently is, we say, let's maximize revenue generation. That's a wrong approach. You shouldn't maximize. We're saying optimal. Optimal means, what is it that I can collect today that will not compromise my ability to collect more tomorrow? And also, you don't just go there and say, hey, you haven't paid taxes, let's close down the business. If you close down the business, you won't have taxes to collect tomorrow. Do you want to even start by understanding the business first? We've seen tax authorities around the world where the taxman is the one giving insight and data to government to design policy. They say, we've seen this pattern from this sector, they are struggling because their payment has come down by this percentage. That's where we want to get to. So that training, including mindset shifts, and we call it change management, is ongoing now with the revenue authorities. And that's also one of the reasons why we felt that we shouldn't have over 60 agencies collecting revenue. Let them focus on, we've seen countries like Rwanda, where even if you want to pay for driver license, international passport, you pay to the taxman. And all that the agencies have to do is just process passport, process driver license. That's where we want to get to.
I mean, that's going to be a little difficult because, because for many of the state governors that you've been speaking to recently, this is the only way they generate revenue. They haven't been able to think outside of the box as to how to use their state to generate revenue. All they know how to do is to tax their people. And then apart from that, we have, it's almost like banks where they have targets.
But okay, like, the point
where
is
they have targets. So all the man is thinking about, as someone who runs like the DRTS in Abuja here, they're given a target. So I'm thinking about meeting up my target. Same thing with banks. I'm thinking of meeting up my targets. You're telling me to care about the people.
No, we're saying that you can exceed your target by doing the right thing. So the data shows us already that all of these MDAs and local governments, the whole country is under 500 billion naira. We can make multiples of that from collecting personal income tax correctly. So, and this is also one of the things we're trying to discourage from saying. They'll say states should get creative. We're saying don't be creative. You should not be creative about taxes. You should have few taxes and collect them efficiently. That's what we need to do. That's why we've seen ozone layer taxes, pollution taxes, all manner of taxes. And they're still not collecting the revenue, at least officially, that we need. So we don't want to continue to celebrate incremental progress of it's more by 10% than last year. We need
I'm sorry, when you said ozone layer tax,
and this is for real, I'm not making it up.
It's not about to happen here.
Wait, so
no. I'm telling you that it has happened.
Yes, you turn on the generating set.
They have the one for generators, they have for businesses.
So you're affecting the
they
ozone
said they want to maintain the ozone. I said, do they even know where the ozone layer is?
I can't believe
we actually have that for real.
Yeah? What ozone layer agency?
They also have voting at this rate. If we're not careful, these people, anything to just get more money. That's all they care about.
Your generators are affecting the ozone layer. You need to pay
But in terms of expanding the tax net and digitization, where are we with that? Because that is very crucial, very important, and it can be very effective.
Yeah, I just said earlier on that we want to move from asking people to tell us how much they earn. We want to be telling them. That's technology we have in mind. So we're developing a system now. We call it Tax Information Consolidation and Collaboration. There's an executive order for it, and we have a draft bill for it to enact it into law. How it's going to work is we're going to use a foundation identity, which is NIN for individuals. For businesses, we use the RC with Corporate Affairs Commission. So any other identity will now be secondary or operational. So that foundational identity will tag it to every economic activity. Whether you're opening a bank account, you're spending on your payment card, you're traveling abroad, your phone, whether you open a wealth management account, stock exchange, all economic activities, register land, vehicles will be there. So if you put Taiwo Edele on the system, it tells you what I've spent for the year, and then you can then see, this Taiwo guy, this your tax you submitted is not reconciling. So that will help us to, one, identify who is poor. That's why we said our analysis shows that the informal sector, we should only target top 5% for tax, because we think that the bottom 95% are just struggling to survive. So we think that's where the silver bullet will come from. In collecting the right amount of taxes from the people that should be paying those taxes in a progressive manner.
So clearly, strategy, the approach, a lot of things to have, and then it affects every aspect, both from the tax collectors themselves, those who also pay, because sometimes when they come to you, they ask you, they look at your books, even when they know that you're at a loss, they still want to tax that loss.
Yes.
And you feel, no, this cannot be realistic.
Yes, they want to tax your loss because they say they don't trust you. And I said, but if there's just one person who is honest in Nigeria and they have made a loss, that's punitive. So why don't you design your system to find out who is lying? And this is something that's been done. It's not novel. It's been done in many countries in the world. You use third-party data, because it's either you're buying from someone or you're selling to another one. So what I'll do is give that other person an incentive to report the data to me, and I'll tell you, you just sold to someone, and it's 2 million. So that's your turnover.
I think that's going to be very interesting to keep focusing on some of these things in the days ahead. So yes, the health fund is supposed to kick in real quick, but maybe we'll have to see, because the other thing that came to my mind when you spoke about you telling them what you have actually earned. I know this is not your purview, how the politicians handle all of these things. Because if the people perceive they are using it wrongly, they may kick against some of these things.
Yes, so we've identified that as a potential area of challenge already. So we are putting it in all of the design. I know there has been the conversation about NIMC recently. So we believe that that integrity has to be guaranteed. We've developed even protocols for assessing it. So you can't even just assess it just because you work for the tax authority. So we are positive that we'll be able to handle this well without any
paradigm shift in the thinking.
Yes.
I wish you all the best.
That's what we need. And all the support we can get.
This can work, really. But we all just need to play our part and ensure that these things are done, because it's also us holding those up there accountable. Because if it's our taxes, you can't tell us stories about some of these things. We have to see that you are accountable to the people. If not, what's the point of all the work? All right, thank you very much indeed, Tawe Idile, and all the best to you and your team.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Business Morning on Sunrise Daily is up next.
Thanks, Chamberlain. Well, hello, welcome to the second trading day of July. Let's get to the top stories that set your agenda now, starting with oil prices. We see a little change today, holding near the 2-month highs reached in the previous session on expectations for rising fuel demand from the summer travel season and possible U.S. interest rate cuts that could boost economic growth. We see Brent crude there's trading $86.82, breaching that $85 mark, up 0.25%, continuing the rise we saw from yesterday. WTI, that's the U.S. grade, that's $83, moving farther away and farther higher from the $80 psychological level, 0.14%. So we're seeing strength there with prices in the oil market. Let's get a check on the FX market now. See the NAFEX that depreciated by 27 naira 42 kobo to fix at 1,515 naira. So from a big gain on Friday, that was the last trading day of June, we see a big drop, 1.84%. That's for NAFEX. For NAFEM, 1,508 naira. That was a close from previous close of 1,510 naira. So we see a gain there, 0.23%. Let's get a check on money now. Nigeria's money supply, also known as M3, has climbed to a new peak of 99.24 trillion naira in May, up from 96.97 trillion naira level recorded in April this year. That's according to latest money and credit statistics data from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The amount, which comes after a slight decline in March, indicates a 2% increase on a month-to-month and 78% jump from 55.69 trillion naira recorded in the same period last year. The new increase in money supply also comes in the face of the CBN Monetary Policy Committee's stringent measures aimed at controlling inflation. I'll see the acting director of other financial institutions department at the central bank, Mr. Arugundade Abayomi, is seeking the cooperation of member countries in the West African Monetary Zone in ensuring better regulation of the fintech ecosystem. Mr. Abayomi, who was representing the central bank governor at a meeting in Abuja, says effective regulation of the subsector will help prevent money laundering. Take a listen.
It's the 10th meeting of the College of Supervisors for Non-Bank Financial Institutions of the West African Monetary Zone.
So, Deputy Director, thank you.
Participants are drawn from Ghana, the Gambia, Guinea, Liberia, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. They are reminded to continue the monitoring of policy actions and spillovers to ensure that the financial system is resilient.
In the current economic landscape, our sub-region faces several challenges, including inflation pressures, currency fluctuations, and post-pandemic recovery efforts. These challenges underscores the need for coordinated policy responses and enhanced regional cooperation to ensure economic stability and growth across the sub-region.
Emerging risk to the financial system include climate-related risk, internet disruption, cyber and social media threats arising from digitizations of financial services to strengthen the resilience of the financial sector. Member states should develop an adequate national cybersecurity strategy an appropriate regulatory and supervisory framework.
The Central Bank Governor, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso, who is represented by the Acting Director of Other Financial Institutions Department of the bank, wants all WAMSI countries to beam their searchlights on the fintech market for better contribution to member countries' economy.
We reiterate the importance of monitoring trends, risks, and innovation of MPFIs, OFIs as their increasing transaction volume pose major financial system stability risk. Fintech loans is one of the most commonly reported innovation. While overall this may appear small in relation to the size of credit granted by the DMDs,
members of the West African Monetary Zone have announced that they are intensifying their monitoring efforts to improve policy coordination and achieve significant economic growth.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Sarah Chimugu, Channels Television News.
All right, now to our first conversation. We see inflation numbers for May. That shows a rise of 33.95%. But digging deeper into the contribution of items at the divisional level, we see health contribution year on year to these inflation numbers, 1.02% jump there for May. Health contribution also for the month-to-month level, I would say about 0.08%. So we're seeing a rise there with contribution of health into the headline inflation that we have. All right, let's chart the way forward now with Dr. Enna Taishes, the CEO and founder, Get Medco, joining us from our Abuja studio. Great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
So talk to me about how you see Nigeria's healthcare sector, at this time, and your thoughts on how we got here. We see how much people are spending for pharmaceuticals at this point.
Yes, let's just say it like this. There is a way forward, and there are significant improvements happening even as we speak. Unfortunately, we're way behind the 8 ball, and there's a lot of catching up to do. So when I look at the Nigerian healthcare sector, there are 5 issues that I think are prevalent that need to be addressed. One is, and I coined the term TRACE, the acronym TRACE, which stands for training, retention, accountability, consequences, as well as equity. So the A is also for access as well. And I think that these 5 things are really the pillars on which the recovery should stand. We need to train our physicians better so that they can even be up to world standard. There are a lot of gaps. Even as far as retraining them, having them do exams and making sure everybody is up to date, retaining our physicians. We know that that's a big issue because many of our doctors are leaving for greener pastures, as it were, in other countries. So these are the major issues that I believe are afflicting our system at this time. And inflation is huge. Unfortunately, that's as a result of our economy. So now drugs are much more expensive, and you can imagine those who have to take chronic medications for diabetes, hypertension, what they have to pay now. Those who are on dialysis, how much they have to pay for each session. It's really a big issue, and I'm hoping that with the coming changes, that these can be improved.
Right, and definitely, talking about the prices of pharmaceuticals at this time, we see the federal government making some moves right now with an executive order slashing taxes on pharma inputs. What do you think would be the immediate impact of this?
Well, I think apart from slashing taxes, we need to make sure that there's a follow-through in the reduction of the cost of these medications, especially to those who are not able to afford the medicines. So, for example, in the U.S., we have subsidies. So the government provides subsidies so that the medications are not as expensive. And I think that this is so important for the government to say, apart from slashing taxes, how can we inject the system so that we have less financial burden to get these medications?
All right, let's look
and
at
also,
right.
the other side effect, I'm sorry to interrupt you, the other side effect is that people will start going to other routes to get medications that may not be the right medicines or that may not be verified by the Drug Association.
Right, because we see some people having to fall back to agbo, at this time, because
exactly.
We see how much these medicines are. But talk to me about medical tourism now, still a burning issue right now. But with currency volatility, how would you describe the rate of medical tourism to and outside Nigeria, at this time?
Yes, Nigerian doctors make up over 10% of Black doctors worldwide. That's a huge percentage. And, now in the UK and Canada especially, there's a huge dearth of physicians. So what they're doing is they're coming to Nigeria to say, let's get all these doctors into our country so that they can, help us with our healthcare situation, because they also have a numbers situation there as well. So they're, beckoning to these doctors, and they're telling them, hey, we'll give you housing. You can bring your family. You can even bring a nanny. You can bring whatever you want, and we'll provide all these things for you. And it's hard to compete, because when you look at the salaries, when you look at the infrastructure, these are the two things that are bringing that are making the doctors decide to leave Nigeria. So we do have to look at our compensation structure, because it does not compare to our counterparts in other parts of the world. And so it's hard when you now have an open door where there's no immigration issue to choose to stay here when you have to provide for your family and you have to make a better life for yourself. So I think that we do have to take a hard look at the physician salaries, at the healthcare salaries in general, and really pay more attention and more respect to these important institutions.
All right, let's look at investment in the sector at this time. We've seen the central bank MPC, they've moved to tackle inflation with interest rate hikes, increasing the cost of credit at this time. What would you like to see, going forward, can boost healthcare, the healthcare industry? You're talking about investments, FDI, at this time.
I think that we have to find a way to incentivize people who want to invest in the healthcare sector, meaning that, they should be guaranteed a higher rate of returns. You already mentioned it earlier, the tax implications, all these things. I think, once you reduce the red tape, as it were, to these institutions, you will get an increased influx into this, and also guaranteeing some level of returns. Healthcare is a big booming business right now. Even the number of, diaspora physicians returning home, it's really impressive. People do want to come home, but what they want to ensure that there's infrastructure. So I think infrastructure is a huge opportunity for investors. I also think that hospitals and satellite centers, so that people can get care, have access to care wherever they may be, I think it's really, really important. So I would say, however, we can reduce the bureaucracy for investors to come in, particularly for healthcare, I think the government should look into that.
All right, what about personalized healthcare? Talk to me about what kind of solutions this is actually bringing.
Thank you. So personalized healthcare, let's start with the definition. It's really a style of medicine or an art of medicine which improves significantly the patient experience as well as physician outcomes. It's basically physicians saying, I'm not going to treat you as one of many. I'm going to treat you as one of one. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hear you out, as opposed to a lot of times the paternalistic approach that a lot of physicians have. Now it involves you sitting down at eye level with the patient, you listening to them, you looking at their entire situation, their socioeconomic status. Can they actually afford the medication that I'm recommending? Can they actually afford the hospitalization that I'm suggesting, or the surgery or the procedure? So it's really looking at the totality of the patient, looking at their whole personal outlay and saying, how best can I support you with this condition that you have? And really what it does is it gives the patients agency. And because they have that agency, they're more involved in their health healthcare, and then we see dramatic improvements in their outcomes, in their numbers. So blood pressure, diabetes, even cancer outcomes, and so on, because they feel like they were given some level of control over their health. So that's really what we're trying to push at GetMedCo, that with every client that we have, you will have that personalized care. We won't treat you like, oh, just the next patient that walked in. We want to know everything about you. We want to know your fears. We want to know your concerns. We want to know, what do you think about, what concerns you the most about what's going on right now? And I think that if you treat each patient like this, and this is really just an extra 5 minutes in your visit, if we do this, if we make this investment, we'll see a dramatic improvement in healthcare outcomes.
Talk to me about your outlook for Nigeria's healthcare industry, at this time, seeing all the challenges we have at this time and seeing how the federal government is trying to help boost this industry at this time. What are you seeing in the future for Nigeria?
So what I see it's going to be a long road. I see it's going to be a long road, but it's not an impossible road, and it's not a hopeless road. The unfortunate situation is we are reacting now. I wish that some of these changes that are taking place now happened before the massive exodus of physicians. So now there has to be a significant pull to bring diaspora physicians back, and also to increase the number of physicians, the number of prospective physicians in our schools. We also have to bring diaspora physicians and educators back, so that we make sure that the education that these new doctors are receiving is up to par and up to world standard. So I do think that, Nigeria is headed in the right direction, but it cannot be one thing at a time. We have to have, like I said, we have to address these 5 different pillars so that we're moving forward together. And, in the next 5 years, we will see a dramatic increase. There was a time that Nigeria was on par with the Western world in terms of medical care and medical education. And I believe that we can get back there. And we need to be able to attract our physicians abroad to come back and, give a month, give 2 months in the year. And if the more physicians that we have, the more that we can do this. And I know a bunch of my colleagues who are willing to come back. We have a lot of Nigerian physicians who are happy to come back home, not permanently yet, but at least for a time period so that they can help.
All right. Come back home this time. Thank you so much. It was great having you, Dr. Enna Taiches.
Yes, thank you so much.
And founder at GetMedCo. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we head straight to the commodities market. That's in a moment. Just stay with us. All right, let's head straight to the commodities market now. We have Dumebi Oluwole joining us right here in the studio. Great to have you, Dumebi.
Thank you so much, Laddie. Good morning.
Yeah, so much data upon us yesterday from the MBS. And one is in capital importation.
Yes.
And that rose by 210%. That's good news.
I mean, it is. It is. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer,
right.
but yeah, it's good news to see that, we're seeing some, inflow of capital into the country. A very important thing to actually notice is the type of investments that we're actually getting. And primarily, it was an increase in hot money, foreign portfolio investment.
Hot money again.
Yes. So, and a very good thing, a very good pointer to the fact that this was actually going to increase is the fact that from the NGX's reports, weekly report, or even monthly report on foreign portfolio investments into the stock exchange, you see that it had been increasing over time. The level of inflows versus outflows was just up until, I think, I would say May. I think, between April and May, we saw like the outflows becoming more than the inflows, and that's just very evident of one of the things that happened between those months. But regardless, we've seen an uptick in foreign portfolio investments into the country, and a very good reason for that is the structural reforms. We've seen Fitch, Moody's, and even the IMF come out to somewhat commend the federal government and the CBN for the recent changes that they've made to Nigeria's monetary policy structure, really. And a very good thing that has happened, even though we're still seeing the returns on investment, still negative, but because interest rates have increased substantially compared to last year and even 2 years ago, we've seen that the gap has narrowed with inflation somewhat, and investors are a bit more bullish on some of the securities and investment options that they have in Nigeria today. So, but primarily as an economist, I cannot help but mention the fact that we do need more stable type of investments coming into the country. Hot money is good, yes, but if we do get more of foreign direct investment in terms of businesses staying in, more capital, the longer term effect of that, or the ripple effect on the economy, is more substantial in terms of productivity and job creation. And that's primarily what Nigeria needs today. And unfortunately and fortunately, I would say that somewhat sits on the table of fiscal authorities. I remember the last time I came, I was very, I was very hard on the fact that we do need to see more complementary moves from the fiscal authorities to support what the monetary policy authorities are doing. A very good thing that has happened so far is, I think just this week, and it started off, I think yesterday, is the fact that the CBN is trying to ensure that, the forex market is more cohesive. There's a lot more reduced bottlenecks. I think they removed the price verification system to ensure that form-M procedures for traders are a lot more seamless. So we're obviously seeing a lot more moves from the monetary side, and we need to see more complementary things going on
from the fiscal side at this point. But looking at the data, obviously FDI didn't do as well as foreign portfolio investment, but we have FPI, at this point. So talk to me about what we can actually do with what we have, even though it's hot money.
Hot money. I mean, hot money, just like what is easy to come in, also easy to go out, right? And that's one of the reasons why globally and domestic economists don't really advocate for us banking and economy sustainability on hot money. Simply because you notice most of this hot money actually goes into the stock market. Once they buy the stocks, and before you know it, it's all out, right? And they're more short term because foreign portfolio investors want money that they can want investments that they make, then they're able to get their money out quickly. And until we're able to see this more, and what that basically just tells us is that while we're seeing this inflow of money coming in, it's still not sufficient, because what Nigeria needs, we need long-term fiscal sustainability. We need enough forex to come into the country so that we're not seeing this much swing in the naira. We also need enough forex to come in so we see the naira appreciate substantially towards the targets that these reforms have, put in place, and that's around 700, about 800 naira to $1, and we're still very far from that. See, the naira, even though it appreciated, we're seeing 1,500, 1,500, exactly, and that still goes a long way to affect businesses. So two things to mention here. Even though this is a good thing in terms of we're seeing money coming in, how much of this money is actually supporting the businesses that use naira and dollars as well to import and even export, right? So because this large inflow of FX that we're seeing at a particular point in time, because this is just a flow, it's not a stock, meaning that if it's not balanced, if it doesn't stop at some point, right? If it's not, for lack of better, I'll say stock. If it is not, if the stock is not stock, right, for that particular point in time, we won't be able to do so much with it, right? And by stock, I just mean money that we can use to, keep building up the economy, not money that comes in and in 3 months it's out. It's out. Or money that comes in and in 6 months it's out. So that's one of the reasons why, even though this is a very good news, it's important that we don't take our eyes away from what is truly important, and that is long-term investment, long-term capital. Because the end goal here is not to just resuscitate the economy for a short time. We want the economy to live long. We want the economy to breathe well. Right. And for that to happen, we need long-term capital. We need productivity to be at its peak, right? And right now, that's not happening. And until we see that...
it's still going to be hot money.
Yeah, it's still going to be hot money.
All right, let's look at the PMI. We're seeing it drop to a 7-month low.
Yes.
Still above that
50%, yeah, 50
mark,
points, yeah.
But it's a big drop from about 52%.
Yes, it is. And that's the conversation about productivity I'm talking about, right? What this just tells, because PMI is broken down into five or six sub indices, right? We have output levels, we have new orders, employment, supplier delivery time, business confidence, right, and inventory. And when you look at the breakdown of all of those things, you realize that even though to some extent output levels have somewhat improved compared to maybe the beginning of the year, you see that demand is very low, and that is affecting businesses, right? Business confidence is also very low because we're still not seeing cohesive fiscal policy initiatives that will support businesses, right? So businesses are saying, okay, in the long term, even though I won't say I'm making so much profit now, but I would say even though things are looking a bit better now, how about the next 12 months? There's no stability. There's still so much uncertainty going on in the economy. How can I project for today up until the next 12 months or even the next 6 months? And you say a lot of businesses in Nigeria, particularly FMCGs, are very bearish. And that, again, disincentivizes the kind of long-term investments that we need to sustain the economy, right? Then when you also look at new orders, if people are not buying the stock that you've taken up today, how are you able to get new orders for the next time, right? Then you also look at supplier delivery time. That has substantially shortened over the past few years. Reason being logistics issues, an increase in transportation costs, increase in distribution expenses, right? And the longer all of these issues remain, supplier delivery time as well will remain low. And that also disincentivizes businesses. You find that even though some businesses are actually finding ways to work together to collaborate to ensure that they're able to mitigate some of these issues, they're still struggling substantially. And remember that the kind of businesses that this PMI tracks are primarily small private sector businesses that have been hard hit by the naira, depreciation or the naira swings, high interest rates, and all of that. So again, to some extent, I do think that this decline would probably remain for like the short term.
Right.
And this also is a pointer to what our GDP growth would look like for the next quarter.
Right.
PMI is a forward-looking indicator to GDP growth. An example would be if you see substantial increase or substantial expansion in GDP in the PMI numbers for I would say the first quarter of the year, it kind of gives us a pointer that okay, GDP growth might come in higher. And remember, our GDP grew about 2.98%. For a developing economy, that's substantially low. And when you look at the average of GDP growth over the past 5 years, you see that's an average of about 2% for an economy that's supposed to be, the giant of Africa and supposed to be producing a lot more.
So much
right?
impact there.
Yes.
Definitely. But yeah, it's still above 50 points, mark.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get
somewhere.
Improved.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dumbi Oluwole. Always great having your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, now, so let's just have a view of what played out in the market yesterday. It was a marginal loss for the first trading day of July, and we see there 0.04%, but still above that 100,000 level. That's for the all-share index. Equity cap sits at 20. Down about 20 billion for yesterday's trade. Let's get a check on the trading activity. We see trading activity was somehow subdued, but it's all red for the counters we track. Banking, consumer goods, and insurance, all down for yesterday's trade. So it was definitely bearish. That's it from me on Business Morning. We'll give you a summary of the stock market close for today and details of the FX, market. Thank you for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. This is back to the Sunrise Daily team.
Dele Giwa said, one life lost in cold blood is as gruesome as millions lost in a pogrom. Our hearts goes out to the victims. So far, we have recorded 32 deaths. 42 were brought in from Gwoza. About 14 have been discharged. About 26 are currently receiving attention. And I want to use this forum to most sincerely register our profound gratitude to the Borno State government, to National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and the State Emergency Management Agency and ICRC for rising up to the challenges of the times and giving their best in terms of support. The hearts of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is with the victims, and he specifically instructed us to come and offer our condolences and commiserations to the victims of this incident. We are here with the Director General of NEMA, with the Minister of Agriculture, with the Minister of Transportation, and of course, the Chief Whip of the Senate is a son of the soil from Gwoza, so he was here since yesterday. And the acting governor had been working around the clock to provide succor and support to the victims.
Welcome back. Yes, we've got Mr. Gabs Katia here with us. He's the project coordinator of Gwoza Refugees Resettlement Initiative, to speak to us about some of these issues that we do have out there. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Well, it does raise a lot of concern for a lot of people, but for you, you're an indigenous of the area, so you do know the place inside out. Yes. So what kind of information are you getting at the moment about what happened?
The information is just what you have heard. Gwoza is under siege by Boko Haram fighters. That's the information all over.
But in terms of the approach, the coordination, plans to get a solution, there are several people who are divided about how they should go about it. But yes, everyone agrees something needs to be done. But from your perspective, what do you think about how we're approaching this to ensure that this becomes history? No more bombings there.
Yeah, I think just, is it by coincidence? On 26th of last month, that's June, we wrote to Mr. President to say the best thing to do in this situation is to allow the stakeholders, the people of Gwoza, to come together and say enough is enough. Just as you have said, the President said wants to retrieve the country for everybody in his renewed hope agenda. So we were inspired by that renewed hope agenda to write to the President to say, okay, we appreciate your intention. What we need to do now is constitute stakeholders committee, throw this problem back to them, let them solve it by themselves, because it has to be, there must be an insider before all these things happen. But if they are brought together in a kind of town hall and say, enough is enough, let us do something about our situation, I think this is how to go about it.
I want to be able to pick on something you just said now. You wrote to the President before the attack?
On 26th.
So that was before the attack?
Before the attack.
Why?
Just to suggest to him, you know, before then, there was a letter by the refugees from Cameroon. The refugees in Cameroon were inspired by the renewed hope agenda of Mr. President. Then they said 10 years is enough. We've been in Cameroon for 10 years.
Okay, the Nigerians there.
The Nigerians, from most of them are from Gwoza.
Okay.
120,000 of them. So wrote a letter Mr. President, you are welcome. We have seen your agenda, the Renewed Hope agenda. So we are inspired by that so that you do something about our situation.
I mean, but it's actually pretty strange, you know, the fact that they had just written to him on the 26th, the conversations had just started, and then an attack follows immediately afterwards. But I want to be able to find out, you're working with the Resettlement Initiative.
Yes.
So for Gwoza residents who have been displaced.
Yes.
Why are you in Abuja? Why aren't you doing this in Borno?
We don't have... if you go, half of Gwoza population are here in Nasarawa and Abuja.
So what you're saying is that the displaced people from the terrorist attacks have moved to Nasarawa and Abuja.
And all over the country.
So your office plans, what your organization does is to plan their resettlement. Resettlement where?
All over. Like we have about 5 camps in Nasarawa. So whoever is willing to come to Nasarawa, it's voluntary. Whoever is willing to come to Nasarawa, we find a space for him, we find what to do, then we assist him or her.
Okay. So when last did you go to Gwoza?
It's about 2 years.
So it's been 2 years since you went to Gwoza?
Yes.
When the attacks happened, were you able to contact anyone there? Were you able to get information as to what has happened?
We are in contact all over. We are in contact with brothers. Some of our brothers are still there.
So when they said these terrorists came in from Polka and from the Mandara Mountains, talk to us a little bit, because you're from there, although you've not been there in 2 years. Talk to us a bit about the security in that area. That Mandara Mountains. We keep hearing that there is no security anywhere in those areas. What's going on?
What is happening is that when you measure population per square kilometer, but in Gwoza we measure our population per cubic kilometers.
Why?
Because you have the height when you measure this. It's length times breadth times height. That's what gives it. So the height of the mountain.
You also consider that land mass?
Yes, accommodate a lot of
people. So that road up like that, it's also considered land mass?
Yes, so accommodate a lot of people. These terrorists found their way into the mountains. So, and displace all the indigens, or maybe part of them are also indigenous, but presently it is occupied by the terrorists. The whole mountain is occupied by the terrorists.
What about security? Because military operations, the bulk of our budget goes into security, into the war against terrorism. Are there no military formations around that area?
There are military formations, but they are not enough. They are not enough to police the whole area. Like I was telling you, you have the height, you have the length, you have the breadth. So the military personnel posted there are overwhelmed. And there are also the aspect of the beneficiaries of the situation who will not want this thing to finish.
Who are these beneficiaries? You know them?
You could be one, Chamberlain. You could be one, because as long as you want something, you want revenue. If you are greedy, any human being that has the element of that greed could be a beneficiary of what is happening if he is benefiting from the situation. So that's why I said you could be one.
This resettlement initiative that you work on, how do you get funding? How do you resettle people? How does this work?
So what happened is I retired as a director in the National Directorate of Employment. My first lump sum pension was what I started with. Built some houses as a camp. If you want, we can even go there. So I said, my brothers, first, before this thing happened, I was a director here in FCT, working. I built my house in Nasarawa State.
So you built the resettlement places
I built the settlement for them.
Where, in Abuja?
In Nasarawa.
In Nasarawa?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is what happened. It's from my lump sum.
Yeah, you
gratuity.
said so earlier.
Yeah.
So, but now, after you built it, so when they come in, you put them in these houses and then...
When it is...
But there has to be a lot of funding.
Yeah.
So where does that funding come from? It can't be that same pension money.
What happened now, for example, before the people wrote letter from Cameroon, they came to me. They said, we learned that you are resettling people, you are receiving people, so we are here we are. Do it for us too. I said, there's a limit to what I can do. About 120,000 of you, I cannot do that. What I do is individual person, I resettle him, or I beg any close friend who understands what I'm doing and assist. But on a large scale like this, I will not be able to do it.
So let's talk about the relations. You said, you've mentioned it, you go to people, the people help you out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the relationship between people like you who run these sort of NGOs across the country and the Borno state government.
Yeah.
What kind, is that some kind of relationship between both of you?
Or
are you acting in isolation?
Well, we are just acting in isolation. We've not been able to come together and synergize.
You know, yesterday as well, when we looked at this matter, we had the guys who also thought that they are probably not just fake columnists, but persons who want this to continue. But is this more or less, even though he said he had his own info, so is it a general feeling amongst residents in Gwoza that there are several people who are benefiting and so don't want it to continue, or that is something they can actually say, we have a fact that this is why this is continuing?
Well, the fact that I can tell you is general. I was driving from here to Jalingo. My car broke down in Okari. I met a coffin maker. So I came out of the car, asked my driver to go and fix the car. So I stayed with the coffin maker. Then I looked, there were many coffins. I asked the coffin maker, I said, where are there so many coffins? He said, back Aswa, there's no market for it. So, your market for coffins is somebody's death. Then all of us laughed. I made this analogy, Chamberlain, is you cannot say people are not benefiting from this. You cannot say these are people that are benefiting from it. So, definitely, those who are at the forefront of it will benefit from it. So, if I get your question right, that we cannot pinpoint, it is not to say these are people that are benefiting. If we want to do that, then those politicians, the politicians who are always elected from 2011, there has been no election in Borno. Is what they do is appointment.
No election?
No,
they said
real election. Real election, there was no election.
That's what the issue is. People keep saying these things, but you don't have actual proof. Do you have actual proof? That's what Chamberlain is trying to say.
Yes.
When you say people are benefiting from this situation, and they will, of course, it's something you can say, but do you have proof? If you're able to pinpoint and say such and such a person is benefiting from this, like you just mentioned that there hasn't been an election, these are not things that you can just say without having proof. If you're able to pinpoint and say this happened, then maybe people will take you people a little bit more seriously, as opposed to just saying these things and going on with them.
I like the way you put it. Let me start. Before election, what is the electoral guideline says? People must be there in their homes, there must be wards, there must be registered for party men, and the party should present the candidate for the election, and all those procedures. Can you now tell me in honesty, those procedures are followed?
Can you prove that they were not followed?
We are not at home.
Then you can't prove it, sir.
We are not, there is nobody at home. So how can you say you have conducted election in a place where there are no people? They are only in camp. In that camp, you don't have even political party who is belonging to this party or belonging to that party.
You cannot say that there is no one in Borno State. We are looking at Gwoza right now. People were killed at a wedding.
In Gwoza.
There were people killed at a wedding. So which means that people attended the wedding, which means that people are there.
In the camp, the whole town is the majority of Gwoza people live in how many places? Pilka, camp in Pilka. Gwoza town itself, although they have made, it is almost like camp because you cannot go out 2 kilometers of Gwoza outside the town. You can go out 2 kilometers. So what do you call that place? Such a place. You are being caged in one place. So if you are caged in one place and now you are being fed in that cage, somebody tells you that, yes, I'm in politics.
Yeah. I want to be able to move on to other issues that are happening in your state. And it's very unfortunate what's happened in Borno and continues to happen. You have a governor that many people believe in many ways has done a lot with resettlement. In fact, I remember there was a Muslim cleric that came from, I think from Zimbabwe, Mufti Menk, where he came back, he did a whole video where he was showing resettlement houses, schools are being rebuilt, people are being moved away from their IDP camps back to their homes. The whole resettlement business was a very important move of Professor Babagana Zulum.
Yes.
How would you rate those successes? Also bearing in mind that the military has told us yesterday that they had made a lot of successes and that this attack, like the president said, is isolated and some way of making themselves feel like they are more relevant and, basically make us not feel like the military has made the gains that they have made over the past few months. What do you make of that?
It's just what you have. I'll just take what you have said to be true. That's all. I just take what you have said to be true, and yet these things are happening. So you make it for yourself.
When you said that, I had to check again the figures, the latest figures from Borno.
Yeah.
The local government election that held this year.
Yeah.
In January.
Yes.
Where the APC won all the elections, 27 local government areas, 312 councils.
Yes.
And so the candidates polled 110 votes to defeat our closest rival, which is PDP. There are 2,478. And the impression you give us is that all of these figures are allocated, fabricated.
So,
is that what you're saying?
If are not fabricated, if are not allocated, I told you, somebody who is caged under siege, how do you go to him and say vote for another person? The person that is feeding you, the cage owner, is the one that is going to win the votes. You give him your vote.
Okay, but earlier you said that the army, you used the word overwhelmed, but yesterday the army, if not today, released a statement. Defense headquarters, they described the recent terrorist attack in Gwoza as a desperate attempt to, these are their words now, dispel reports of their decline, prove a point that they are not weak, and to create panic to the general public.
Yeah.
And the statement goes on to say that troops remain undeterred in their pursuit of peace despite the bomb attack by the terrorists who killed 20 and injured 52. And so this is a sharp contrast from what you say. So they say, look,
what contrast?
We're really there. We're not overwhelmed. They are declining, so they just detonated this bomb to give people the impression that they are really active.
Still relevant.
Okay, you are not talking in terms of when I said
they were overwhelmed.
They are overwhelmed and they cannot be everywhere.
Yeah.
But the fact is still there that they can't be everywhere. There are certain places that the armies cannot go there.
Like where?
like you mentioned the places, about two wards on the mountains and one on the plain. Gavaga Palawa ward, Chikre ward. These places are still under control. These terrorists are having their market, doing everything they want.
So when the government says we have technically won the war against insurgency, you don't agree with that at all, do you?
Well, we have been saying this all over, that it is not true. So why do Nigerians and the journalists want to repeat all these things? That those are political statements. And you continue to ask everybody, the truth about that is it is a political statement. Everybody wants to say, I have done my best. So that is what we hear.
Is it true that residents of Gwoza, I mean, something that you have a lot of residents who are joining Boko Haram because for them it's lucrative, and so they find it difficult to leave, because if they leave, they keep asking what are they going to come back to. Is that right?
That is true. The first batch of repentant Boko Haram, 95 of them were brought to my office. I was still a director in National Directorate of Employment. The training was in Gombe. So I interfaced with them because we were asked by the federal government then to talk to them, to train them to embrace skills. So National Orientation Agency and NDE were asked to go and be talking to them. The first batch, 95 of them, 70 of them were from Gwoza.
Where are they now?
We agreed, before we were allowed to be talking to them, you had to take an oath that when you finish with them, you don't have to say, I saw this person in camp is one of those repentant Boko Haram. So
to avoid stigmatization of them. So, but they're just out there now.
They're just out there, and let me tell you something. There are some people who even went from my house to go and fight according to him, we are going to take war booty. So they think this is an activity where you can get something.
Well, what do you mean? They left your house to join Boko Haram?
Yes.
And fight for Boko Haram or against Boko Haram?
Yes.
Which one, for or against?
No, fight. They became Boko Haram fighters. Because when you say Boko Haram, there are different things.
Sorry.
Tell us.
So the repentant ones are the ones you're saying went back to Boko Haram?
No. Then we were staying together with them here. This
is a different set. Yeah. From he said from your house.
Yeah, from my house. And they have even come back. They're all over here, leaving their parents there. You see, what people don't understand about this Boko Haram thing, there are a lot of myth around it. Anybody can be that Boko Haram. And we are now answering that your question. It's not, okay, let me just say, Boko Haram is different from Boko Haram fighters. What we have said all over is Boko Haram, Boko Haram. Boko Haram is different from Boko Haram fighters. The terrorists we see are Boko Haram fighters. They are not Boko Haram. The Boko Haram are those who are using the Western education to get money for themselves. So they are out there to fight them. If Western education has just given you an opportunity to take what you are supposed to work for the public, and then you appropriate it to yourself, then that Western education, which is Boko Haram, is what do you call haram? It's forbidden. It's forbidden. So we must fight it.
So, but what do you call those who perhaps say left your house, went to fight, and then come back? What are they? What do we call them?
They are repented Boko Haram, and then they just had a stint into that business venture, if you call it, means of livelihood.
So it's a means of livelihood. That's how they see it.
That is it.
Wow.
Actually, puts a big question mark on this resettlement, this repentant Boko Haram issue. A question that many Nigerians have had over the years about it.
Well, we'll have to go. We're out of time on this one. Gavs Katia is the program coordinator, Gwoza Refugees Resettlement Initiative. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Zembale. Thank you.
Well, there you go. That is it today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Usof. Goodbye.
Have a great day ahead. I'm Kayla Magwa.
Thank you.